Welcome to Lesson 1. This lesson will be the longest one in our course, but I've built in a break for you. In the startup lesson, I introduced you to how the lessons work with a screen capture of the table of contents. In this lesson, there are two sections called Take Action. In the first Take Action section, I've included two exercises you will take to evaluate the relationship between the board and leadership staff. In the second Take Action section of this lesson, called Download Board Materials, you will find 3 documents which we will be discussing during this lesson. There is also a self-assessment you'll take when you complete this lesson that we'll discuss during our first phone call. The bonus materials included with this course that we discussed during the startup video can be found in lesson 1, and we'll talk about those throughout this course. Each of our lessons comes with a roadmap. Here is what your roadmap for each lesson will look like. It will guide you through the if, what, how, and why for each lesson. If you complete this lesson, you will learn the board's legal obligations, how those are expressed in roles and responsibilities, how those roles and responsibilities are learned, why it matters, and how knowing who does what will provide a foundation for a constructive partnership between the board and leadership staff. Each lesson contains one or more of these elements necessary for your leadership staff and board to embrace a role in fundraising. This lesson is a knowledge lesson. The nature of the relationship between the leadership staff and the board of directors is the barometer for your nonprofit's effectiveness to deliver on its mission and raise funds for your mission. The ideal environment in which your nonprofit can thrive will in large part be related to the nature of the relationship between the board and leadership staff. Nowhere is this truer than when it comes to fundraising. There is something called social capital theory, which generally means the factors that allow social groups, including those within organizations, to function effectively. Those factors include interpersonal relationships and a shared sense of identity, understanding, trust, and cooperation. Social capital theory explains how relationships can add value to organizations. The relationship between nonprofit boards and leadership staff can either add value to your nonprofit or can weaken or even cause dysfunction within the organization. We will dive deeper into social capital theory in Lesson 2. Let's find out what type of relationship exists between your leadership staff and the board. In that first Take Action section of this lesson, there are 2 exercises to download. Exercise 1 relates to the CEO relationship to the board as a whole, and Exercise 2 relates to the CEO relationship with the board chair. Please pause this video and review these exercises now. You can then either complete the exercises now or complete them before our first phone call. Either way, it will be helpful to review the exercises now to aid your understanding as we move on. When you do complete the exercises, please send your results to me to the email on your screen before our first phone call. Here's Brooklyn's face again. This is an apt face for how most people come into the fundraising world. Despite serving on 3 nonprofit boards, I didn't learn about the board's roles and responsibilities until I became an executive director. When I first started managing nonprofits, Brooklyn's face describes my feelings and my board's feelings about fundraising. Eventually, we all transitioned into loving to fundraise, and you will learn how this happened in this course. I've often heard, though, from other executive directors that they have boards that are unaware of or unwilling to be involved in fundraising. I've heard from several of my friends who are nonprofit leadership staff, they have no way to explain to their bosses that it is the board's job to learn and participate in fundraising. I get that, and we're going to deal with this awkward situation in Lesson 2. I personally experienced tension between myself as an executive director and various board members at various moments of my nonprofit management career. Looking back, I think what stopped me from utilizing my prior skills and experience as a conflict resolution specialist were two things. One, time, and two, my own lack of understanding of nonprofit best practices. Time, because I always felt I had too many balls in the air to allow myself to step back, take a breath, and regroup. I would eventually do this when I got to the point of feeling so overwhelmed that I was forced to step back. I once heard someone say that the only reason they knew that balance even existed was because they caught a glimpse of it momentarily when they swung from one extreme to the other. That's how I often felt as an executive director. Learning best practices also took time, so in terms of professional development, I did the best I could to incorporate my learning into the days, weeks, and months of also trying to balance all those balls I had in the air. When I started my first position as an executive director, I quite quickly became familiar with BoardSource. I often relied on BoardSource to provide my nonprofit with up-to-date best practices for our board of directors. BoardSource also has a research arm called Leading with Intent, and they publish reports of their findings. I believe it's every year. I'll be referring to BoardSource resources and Leading with Intent in this course. Let's talk about what the relationship between the board of directors and leadership staff should look like. There is a BoardSource publication called The Source: 12 Principles of Governance That Power Exceptional Boards. There's a link on this slide if you'd like to order the 12 principles. I believe it's about $26 and I recommend you purchase that. The first of the 12 principles describes the ideal and most effective relationship between the board and the chief executive. It's called constructive partnership. While recognizing that the board has the legal responsibility to govern and the chief executive manages the day-to-day operations, BoardSource proposes in its constructive partnership principle that the board and chief executive should be allies in pursuit of the mission. This first principle of the 12 principles also proposes collaboration as the appropriate style of interaction between the board and chief executive. We'll deepen our understanding of this relationship when we discuss social capital theory in Lesson 2. How do you develop and maintain a constructive partnership between the board and CEO leadership staff? How do you move away from boss-employee to partners? These are the 3 steps I propose to developing a constructive partnership. Step 1 is to develop the understanding of roles and responsibilities of board and leadership staff. Step 2, tools for developing communication guidelines. And step 3, tools for developing strategies to strengthen the relationship. The remainder of this lesson addresses step 1, understanding roles and responsibilities of board and leadership staff. Lesson 2 will address steps 2 and 3. Conflict and tension can occur when it's unclear who does what. So knowing who does what must come first. However, and I want to stress that it's important to understand that effective organizations will move far beyond who does what and will have developed the social capital that adds value to their nonprofit. This will be explored in Lesson 2. But we have to start at the beginning, which is with understanding the legal fiduciary duties of nonprofit board members and then how those are expressed in a set of board roles and responsibilities. The American Law Institute says volunteer nonprofit boards are often much less knowledgeable about their responsibilities than their paid for-profit counterparts. I have to admit that when I served as a board member, I didn't have the knowledge or understanding of the legal responsibilities required to govern properly, which is embarrassing because I was in fact a lawyer. I didn't learn about a lot of this until I became an executive director. And so why does it matter that nonprofits understand these legal responsibilities? That concludes our sample of Lesson 1. I hope you'll set up your free discovery call to continue your journey.